So good afternoon, welcome back to part 2 of our ColorSource course. There's actually not a lot of us in the session this afternoon, so what I thought I might do is unmute your microphones so we can actually sort of chat with each other. Just makes it a little bit easier, I think. You know, you can ask us questions instead of having sort of type stuff into the chat. So, you know, if at any point I have sort of allowed you to chat to us now, so at any point, feel free to chime in with a question. I'm Declan. I am the training program coordinator. I'm based out of the London office, and presenting this afternoon with me is Graham, who is our training and events specialist, or events and training specialist. I can never remember which order is correct.
Events and training, whichever way you like.
But thank you very much. So I'm going to kick this session off. I'm going to stop sharing, Graham, so you can take over.
Cool. Okay.
And I need to just make you a presenter. 1 second. There we go. You are in control.
Excellent. So I'll just share this screen with you. So hopefully some, if not all of you, were here at the first session. We're going to go a little bit more in depth today. So in the first session, we covered most of the lighting features of the console. We didn't quite get around to effects, so we'll start off with that today and look at some of the kind of playback toy functions, which are more the kind of busking functions of the console. And then we're going to go into the audio and video side. So just as a refresher, there are 2 versions of ColorSource available. The standard ColorSource, which is just a DMX output console directly for controlling lighting, and the AV version, which has a HDMI video output and an audio output as well, so that you can do a few things like playing back sound effects locally from the console and playing back static video images to a projector or such like. And you can include those in your lighting states and cue lists and everything there as well. So it's quite a powerful console. So we'll come on to those AV features shortly. But first of all, we just wanted to take a look at some of the effects, which we didn't quite get to last time. So just to familiarize again, you're looking at the offline editor of the console here. We'll switch over to actual view of console a little bit later to do a few other things. But what you're seeing here is the touchscreen on the console. And the controls tab here is where I'm going to go first of all. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to the effects display. And as soon as we do that, we see all the different effects that are available from the console and different types that you can run here. So obviously color we'll start with. Color can be played back on anything with a color mixing system. So any RGB LED or RGBA, any variant of that sort of additive color mixing, and then CMY fixtures as well. So you've got various built-in color effects there. So we're going to add an effect to start off with. So we'll do something fairly simple. We'll just click on add effect here, and the console tells us what it'd like us to do now. So set effect parameters and select channels to operate on. So I'm going to go into my channel display and grab my ColorSource bars here. That's those fixtures there. So you should see those if I bring the level up there, coming on the visualizer in the corner of the screen there. And then from that point, I can just click on any of these color effects that I'd like to play back. So let's start with a good old rainbow chase. And you'll see down here on your little channel map as well, you can see the color has come on those guys. So you can see it on the visualizer or on your channel map there. So not very much is happening right now. They are changing color slightly. But we need to add a little bit of speed here. So on your touchscreen, you would just tap and drag up or drag down here to change this parameter, as we did with the moving light controls in the last session. And I can do that with my mouse in the offline editor, just click and drag. So we've sped up a little bit there. And we're just doing a nice little roll through a rainbow effect. A couple of the other controls that you've got here, we've got the depth here. So depth is a little bit like the sort of size of the effect. It's more of an intensity control for an effect in this respect here. So if I drag that down, you should notice that the intensity of that effect comes right down. So you can control kind of your size or intensity there with the depth control. I'll bring that back up again. Right now, everything's happening on the same fixtures all at the same time. So we're doing the same thing on every fixture. We've got a fan control over here. So if I just drag that up slightly, we can fan out that effect across those fixtures. The further I go, the bigger the fan becomes. And then you start to see a nice chase across the fixtures. So the way these are numbered, it's kind of running across the back and then to the front. You'll see that running quite nicely across your buttons on your channel fades up here as well. So I can crank that speed all the way up, crank that fan all the way up there and get it nicely spread out across all the fixtures. or bring it down and have it fanning out much more slowly across there. If you decide that the rainbow effect's not quite what you're looking for, just click on a different color effect and go straight in there for a primary color effect. So we'll see that's going a little crazy there. I might want to drop the speed down on that slightly. And again, it's already got a fan applied, so it's fanning quite nicely across those fixtures there, giving us a fairly nice effect. But I can slow that fan down so it spreads even more across those guys, and then adjust your speed as necessary to see what you need there. There's a control over here called Chroma. So depending on the type of color effect you're playing, you can increase or decrease the saturation of that color effect. So if I drag this down here, you'll see I'm going into negative chroma there, and everything's becoming a little bit more pastel and not quite so overly saturated, which is probably a little bit nicer for some shows. But then if I pull that right up again, it drags it back in and fully saturates the fixtures again. So that will apply on certain effects. Rainbow effect, you'll probably find, is a fairly saturated effect anyway. So by default, some of these effects, you can't really alter the chroma very much. I can drag that down a little on the rainbow effect. I can't go up in saturation on the chroma because it's already fully saturated when it plays that effect back. So you've got a few controls in there. You've got secondary colors. So your cyan, magenta, yellows in there. And then there's a bunch of kind of single color effects. And again, you can play with your chroma there to make that a deeper blue or a lighter blue as you see fit there. You'll notice as this effect is running here, there's a little chip just up in the right-hand corner here. So that's my running effect. If I wanted to run several effects at this stage and then record them all into a cue list, I can just come in and add another effect, and it'll pop it up into the corner there. And you'll see all of those effects listed down there. So you can see what's running, you can select them, and then you can make changes to them as you like. So once I've got my effect as I like it, I'm going to go back to the rainbow effect, because who doesn't love a rainbow effect? Let's speed the fan up a little bit there and get some nice colors going. If you're happy with that, you can record it anywhere you like. You can put it into a playback memory, or you can put it into a cue list. So I'm going to put it into a cue list here. So I'm going to hit record edit, and I'm going to pop this onto a playback memory. And at this point, I can put some text in here and add the text if I like. I might just put in, that's my rainbow chase. And I'm going to just hit the button that I want to put that onto, which is 31. If I go back to my playback page, I'll see that's now loaded on there. So if I clear all, you'll find that I can bring that up. Let's just back here. I may not have had my include option set correctly, so I may need to do that again. Let's have a look. It's a good time to mention include options. Let's bring those guys up and run the rainbow on them again. Bit of a fan and some speed. Okay, when you hit record edit, you will notice that under playback memory, you have include options, which I think we briefly touched on last time. You can choose active fixtures, selected fixtures, or all fixtures. I think what I'd probably done there was deselect my fixtures and have this set to selected, which is why they didn't record. So I'm going to just click active. That's everything that's currently on. I'm including my intensity, color, position, and beam, even though my ColorSource paths don't have them. That doesn't matter there. And then I can record here and just overwrite that content there. Let's clear that running effect. Bring up the fader, and there's my effect running there. So that's a simple color effect. Let's take a little look now at a shape effect. So obviously these are for moving fixtures. Anything that's got pan and tilt can play back a shape effect here. So again, I'm going to go in and grab my moving lights. This time I'll do it from here on my stage map. Pick those up and turn them on. And I might have in here some position palettes. So let's put them in their backlight position. Maybe let's go in this downstage line here. And handily, I think I already have a nice full iris there. So we'll just look at these beams here and we can see how this is going to run. So let's go into our effects again. And I'm going to add effect. And by default, it just pops this effect in here, but I can choose the fixtures that I want to put it on, which are already selected, and tell it I want a circle. So you'll see this is a pretty large circle right now. They're going all over the stage. That's probably not what we want. They're going back on themselves as well. So we're going to need to drop the depth down here, which will make that circle a lot smaller. Hopefully we'll see them come back into view there. So it's running fairly slowly right now. Again, you have the speed control here. So we can just speed that effect up a little bit. That's a little bit more like it. Get those guys going a little faster. You also have the fan control here again. So obviously if you want to offset them and have them running slightly separately to each other, then you can bring in your fan there and they'll start to do that. It's worth knowing that the selection order that you pick those fixtures in is also relative to this fan. So if I go back into my channel selection, I'm just going to deselect those fixtures and you'll see that effect drops off them as I do that. If I reselect them in a different order and then play around with the fan, you'll see that the offset becomes slightly different depending on the order that I selected those fixtures in there. Looking at this effect, I'm fairly happy with what it's doing. It's going a little too far into the wings though. So obviously it's a circle. I might want to try and squash that down into more of an oval. So you've got a couple of controls over here called rotation and aspect. So if I bring in my aspect a little bit, you'll see that that's what that's effectively doing is squashing the circle into an oval at the sides. And the fixtures are no longer going all over the wings. They're staying more on stage, which is what I was looking for all along there. The rotation tool here will effectively spin that oval around. So if I change my rotation, I start to go off to the sides of the stage and less upstage and downstage. So I can spin that around. If you can imagine that axis, if anybody's ever looked at this kind of control on an EOS console, you'll see that there's actually a little graph of how that works, and it's quite easy to see what's going on there. But it's basically taking an oval and moving it in different directions, like spinning a par lamp. So again, fairly happy with the way that effect's running. So I'll record that somewhere, just put it onto a memory. Again, let's make sure let's have the active fixtures, nothing else on stage. And I'm going to include intensity, color, position, and beam in this effect, just so it plays back like that. And I'll just tap on there. And if you want to just double check, it's in there. Let's clear all. And we can bring that fader up, and there they are. So shape effects, there's many different ones to play with there. Fiddle around to your heart's content. But the circle is probably one of the most common ones that you'll find used. So let's take a look at intensity effects now. So this, as it describes, is just for intensity. There are a bunch of kind of flickery type effects in here. You can see the trampoline one there is kind of coming up and down. You've got mountain and wander. So if you're creating fire effects or something like that, you might want to look into one of these. Or if you just want a simple kind of flashing on-off effect with a little fade to it, maybe the cosine's a good one. There's a basic on-off here as well. So let's just build a quick one of those. For this, I think I'll just use my downlights in open white. So if I grab those guys, bring them up. And let's go to controls effects. And let's start with the cosine. So if we run that there, bring up the speed a little bit. And you can see that's just running a cosine wave up and down. And it's dropping them down to 0 from the full level, which they were already set to. So if we want, we can bring the depth down a little bit there and effectively make that less of a crazy up-down chase. So it's now actually, because they started at full, it's now bringing them down, but not all the way down to 0. So if I'd started at 0 and played with my depth, then I could have a lower level effect coming up from 0 to a lower intensity. So bring up a little bit of speed there. And what I'm looking for is a chase across those fixtures. So I'm going to bring up the fan and allow that to run across between them. A bit more depth in there. And again, the selection order is important here to the way this is playing back. The numbering on these fixtures is slightly odd. It's going from stage right to stage left, and it's going downstage, upstage, downstage, upstage. So you can kind of see that a little bit more on the channel map on the screen there, what's happening there. So I might just reselect those fixtures in a different order. Maybe I'll do them 2, 4, 6, 1, 3, 5, which should do my back row, then my front row. So if I want at this stage, I can just click on the on-off effect and actually completely change the effect from the cosine to on-off. So if you're not happy with the fading aspect of the cosine, then go for the on-off. There's a few others in here, so also snapping on, fading off, fading on, snapping off, sorry, and then your sparkle and things. So depending on what you're looking for, you can probably find something that fits in there. Staircase will build, and there's a sort of strobe in there that's probably not going to come out very well on the visualizer there. But if I was to take those all down, expand down to 0, so everything does the same thing at the same time, don't think the visualizer is going to quite keep up with this. You've got a bunch of options to play around with in there. So again, let's just go back to something like cosine and fan it out. And I'm just going to record that to keep it. Playback memory. Active fixtures. And we'll pop it over there. And there it is. So obviously I can now start to build up some effects if I want to run several at the same time here. And we're going to get onto the playback toy shortly, which will show you a nice way to busk from this console. But you can stack all those effects on top of each other there at whatever levels you want them to be. So before we go on to that, let's just talk about the last effect type here, which is parameter. You can choose any parameter in any fixture to play back these effects across here. So again, the cosine one and the on-off one are probably quite good if you want to run those. I'm going to maybe make a little iris chase now. So if I'm running my movement chase there may be a time when I want to drop in an iris chase on top of that or something like that. So let's make something here. Let's just clear everything, make sure we're in a good place to start. And I'm going to grab those fixtures, wheel them up. And let's look to put let's do an on-off straight trace there. And in this case now I've got a tile here called parameter. So I just click on here and choose the parameter that I want to play this back onto. I can scroll across and get my iris. And let's bring up a little bit of speed there. And we're just bumping the iris in and out. And again, your depth would control how far in and out the iris comes. And your fan here will allow you to spread that across your fixtures a little. So I'll stick with that for now. Quick and dirty effect. And let's record a playback memory. They're still selected there. So when we go into playback memory, we can use either active or selected. And I'm going to put everything in there. It's only playing back on iris anyway. So that doesn't really bother me as to what's included there. Let's dump that in there. So that should allow me to be on the right page and bring up this chase. And then if I want to play back on top, I can throw in my iris chase on top of there as well. It's worth noting that these bump buttons actually activate an effect as well. So if you've got a basic movement chase running like this and you want to drop in on top of that maybe an iris chase just for a little break in the song, or you want to drop in a color chase, then you can just click on the bump button there and hold and release when you want to. So for those specific moments in a track that you just want to drop something in, you can use the bump buttons there and just release as you need to. So I've put them all into playback memories. That's fine. If you want to put them into cue lists, you can. You just create your effect and have it running, and then away you go. You'll notice if I bring up these effects now, that they are appearing over here in the effect display. So if something's running and you want to make a change to it, then you can come in here, select the specific effect, and then make changes in there as you like. Note that what you're changing there is the running effect. You're not automatically changing the content of the sequence of the playback memory here. So you would need to update that afterwards. So anything that you change in the effect display here, you do need to then go in and edit or re-record the playback memory that it came from originally, or update the cue that you were working in. But it allows you to quickly come in and make some changes to an effect on the fly if you want to just pop in there and speed up or slow down an effect. We will talk about a couple of other options shortly. There's a tap tempo option for sequences, and there is a sound to light option as well. So that's your basic creation of effects in there now. So are there any questions? No questions have come in. You guys can all unmute your mics if you want to throw a question in at any point. I'll give you a second in case anybody's got anything. If not, I will continue. So there's our effects. Let's take a look at another control here. So if we're playing around and we're doing music gigs and that kind of thing, we want to look into the playback toy here. So everything we've done so far on a console, obviously, we can just fly up faders. We can switch between pages of our playback pages, and you can use those bump buttons in there as well. We talked about sequences in the last one. So up on the screen here, we've got 19 and 20 faders there are both sequences I think we made. Let's just clear everything else so we can see what we put in here last time. So we just had a little chase across the cyc at the back there on that sequence. And this was an RGB chase, I think, that we popped in there on that fader. So they're actually sequences running there rather than effects. So when we're playing back our show, obviously we can come in here and play back from the faders and build our states as we like. This might be something we were doing to build a cue and then record the cue and move on, or we're just building up a state for something that's happening on stage on the fly. And it allows you to add those effects in there at the same time. I shouldn't say effects, I should say sequences, running back on those playbacks. The other option you have here is on the touchscreen now, we've got what I call the playback toy. That allows you to play back any memory on its own. So this is like a solo function for a memory. So I can come in here and tap on memory 1, and that just plays back my downlights at their full level that they were recorded in that playback memory. If I tap on specials now, it'll crossfade me over to my specials. So it's a one-hit event playing back that playback memory. You have a timing down here. So if you were to click and hold on there, it'll give you a change time option. So I can come in here and maybe change that to a 5 second. I'll bump back to my downlights, which is going to happen in 1 second. And then if I go to my specials, I get a 5 second fade, and that's a 5 second crossfade between those specials and downlights. And then again, I've got my gobos over here, which are just my static gobos on the floor. So I can very quickly bump between different scenes here. And if I want to change something, I know there's a beat in the music coming up that I want to hit, then I can change that to 0 fairly quickly by just tapping and holding. And then as soon as I do tap on here, I get a little bump change into my gobos. So that's a quick way to play back those different states there. They're static states. But if we have a look through here, you'll see I've got a few other things in here. I've got pink power downlighters, blue power downlighters in there. And you'll notice underneath here, there's a little button which gives you some more information to say that you've got intensity and color information stored in there. And then the next one is a Backlight Gobo special. So if I run that, you'll notice I pressed the blue button there as well. This is telling me it's got X, Y, so it's got pan tilt positions in there. And it's also got some beam information in there. So that beam information is my gobos and my zoom levels. I can come in here and play back my downstage wash, but I don't actually get the beam information from that until I click this blue button. So that would allow me to preset those fixtures in that position before I played back the preset. So if I clear all here and then just run the blue button underneath here, that's just my sort of playback go button, which is running my attributes, and then click on the top and they're marked into position for me. So it allows you to kind of preset things on the fly, ready for the next state. If I just now click on here, so I may be on the backlight on the singers on stage there, I know they're going to wander around a little bit. If I want to grab something from a different state, but not necessarily all of the state, I can just click on here. I haven't recorded this properly. What I would want to do is include in there just the position. So then I can just swing them across to the center stage and include the center stage. I re-recorded this just before we started this session and I forgot my include options again. But that would allow me to sort of very quickly drag something across there. So I might just take that now and record that just for demonstration purposes. Let's record that into playback memory. This time we're only going to include position information from the active fixtures. And I'm going to drop that onto playback 10 there. It's just taken the name of the previous thing. Don't worry about rainbow chase there. But it's now only got X and Y position information in there. So if I was to run that on there, and I just want to bring those fixtures across to the center stage position, but without affecting the gobos or anything like that, I can now just tap on here and it will give me that state, that new position state but without affecting my gobos, and then I can easily tap on there and go back to there again. So some of your inclusion options will allow you some flexibility in what you're playing with in the playback toy here. If we take a look at the range button here, this just taps us up. There's 10 playbacks per page here, and then this takes us basically to playbacks 11 through 20. And then you can tap up there. You can see the effects we've got on the other banks of faders in there. There are 10 pages of 10 playbacks here. So range will take you through the available ones on your console, the available sort of physical faders, and then your page will take you through the 10 available pages of faders there. Something else down here to note about inclusion options is you've got all, position, beam, and effect. So if I click all there, it deselects everything. So this is what's going to get played back when I hit one of these buttons here. So that would be another way for me, instead of recording this position only information, if I just get those guys back again. I know that this takes the gobo out in playback 9 here, if I click on my blue button right now. So if I was to just select position and then click on my blue button, the position will move, but the gobo will not move. Again, if I come back here again and select beam only without position, you'll see that it's going to pull the gobos out and put them in this state, and it's going to change all the other beam attributes of the fixture, but it's not going to change the position. So that's going to cut down on the number of playbacks that you need in your show. If you can carefully structure those with different positions and gobo information, then you can select what you want specifically from there. You'll notice it's got effects, audio, and visual in here as well. So you'll see that you can recall specific things from specific playbacks when we start to look in the audio and visual stuff shortly. So there's one other thing just to discuss here whilst we're talking about playbacks. So you'll notice the two sequences which are on here. You can click on View Edit, and then you can go directly into the sequence edit for that particular sequence. But you'll also notice if I was to run this sequence here, which was my RGB chase at the back, and then click on the rate. Declan, remind me where the rate is. No, forgotten where it's gone now.
If you click on the little run button, does that not change it?
Yes. So running will pop us into step mode here. So that allows us to just tap on the bump button and step through those steps manually. So clicking in there takes you between those two options. Running is running at normal speed, and I've forgotten where the rate function is, but you can enable rate and change the level wheel. And that will bring your rate up and down, and I will remind myself when Declan's talking where that is and tell you later. But yeah, your view edit there will allow you to come in here and make changes directly from there. So I think that pretty much covers the playback toy. I think it's a really cool feature for busking shows. Once you've got that set up nicely, if you've got a standard rig and you're doing little band one-night stands, then it's a really cool way to busk a show in there. And that's a very powerful feature of what's a fairly small console here, a fairly small and very affordable console. So I think it's a really good feature. So I think at that point, if there are no particular questions on effects and playback, I will hand over to Declan and he can talk to you about some of the audio and video features.
Great. I'm going to claim back presenter role, Graham. Good. So what I want to have a look at is the AV side of the console. And assuming that you're on a ColorSource AV, and if you're using the offline software, when you open up the software, you actually have the option to select which model of console you're using. It gives you all four options: the 20, the 40, and the 20 AV and the 40 AV. So you do have the ability to work with all these options offline. But if you come up here into controls and you come across the end, there's a media option. And when you come in there, you've got two options, audio and visual. So we'll start on audio. And there are a bunch of audio effects that have been preloaded into the console. They just exist. They live there as part of the default. And like anything, you can scroll through this list. You can also upload your own sounds to the console. through the setup option in the files menu, there's an import media option, and we'll accept WAV files and MP3s. I think are the two formats in audio that we accept. So I'm just going to sort of scroll through the list. I'm going to pick on dogs, and I'm just going to pick on Alsatian for now as something. Now, unfortunately, the way of doing this demo online is you can't hear this effect through the online demo because my audio is coming through my speakers. So as tempting as it is to bark along to let you know that the Alsatians are working, I will fight off the urge to do that and spare you all my awful Alsatian impersonation. So once you select that, there's a little preview option, and you can click on that. And I've got the neighbor's dog in my ears at the moment. One thing to watch, though, before you record, it's always a good, thank you, Graham, it's always a good idea to turn off the preview function. If the preview function's on when you record, it keeps sort of previewing itself even when you're playing stuff back, so you can't actually get rid of it. So do remember to turn the preview off after you've listened to it. You do have a volume control here, which is your output volume of the console. And you do have the option to take an external source into the console, which is the source option here. So you can select either a line source or a microphone input, and that's an external input into the console. So I've got the dog playing at the moment, and if I want to add that into a queue, record, and I'll put it in the playback memory. And as soon as you do that, it gets this option, and it gives you the little message here at the bottom: select which active media to record. If I had multiple sound effects playing, it would give me the list to include or exclude any of those options. So I'm going to pop that down onto number 21, because for me that's empty. I don't think it's empty on your console, Graham. I probably should use the same numbers. But I've popped it onto 21. So if I come back to stage map, basically pushing that fader up will play back that sound effect. I'm sorry that I'm not able to sort of demo for that terribly accurately. And again, you can also hold down the bump button, and it will it'll bark at you every time you do that. So you do have some quick, easy access to those things once you've stored them in. And you can also add that into a lighting state. So if I had, let's just pop up a couple of channels. Or pop up a couple of playbacks rather, I can then add that sound into that queue. So if I come back into here, pop back into media, let's choose something else. Let's come back. Let's choose people, and let's get some laughter. I can preview that to make sure it's what I need. Oh, the laughter is, yeah, an interesting choice. Good. If I want to then store that into the queue with the active, I can hit record, playback memory, which audio to put in, add in the laughter, and I'm going to pop that down onto 22. So if I come back here and I clear all, pushing up 22 brings up the lighting state as well as playing back that sound effect. The other thing we can do on the console is we can also run some visual stuff. And for us, these are all just static images. At the moment, we're not able to play back any video content. Any of the content that lives in the console are all sort of fixed images. The maximum size for the image is 1280 by 720. And we'll accept a JPEG, a TIFF, and a bitmap and a PNG. So any of the sort of standard graphics formats, you can import those into the console, again, through file import media, and you can bring them into the console. So I'm going to just come down to landscapes, and I've just picked the first one that's there. And once you've selected that, it's going to bring that to the front. You have the option, you can move it around just by clicking and dragging that image around your screen. And you'll see what I've opened up here in the bottom corner is the Pixel toy, which is basically a sort of preview monitor, if you like. It's basically what you're seeing displayed on the screen at the moment. You can pinch and zoom to rescale the image, but you also have some X and Y scale controls here for the image. So you do have some control over what you want to do with that. And there's also an opacity control. So you can start layering images together if you want to get some different effects. And again, the process is the same. If I want that image on a fader, I can come down to record, playback memory. It gives me that little option, which media I want to include. I'll include the landscape, and I'm going to pop it down there on playback 23. I'm going to clear all. And when I push up playback 23, I've got that media file being played back, and that gets output through the HDMI port on the console. So in addition to the opacity setting that you have within the media control, your intensity fader will also control the output. So you can fade your AV in and out with that. So let's pick something. There we go. Let's pick one of those. And I'm going to come back to audio, and I'm going to add in, let's get some, we'll have some cows moving in the background on this one. They're sort of off shot, so we can't see the cows at the moment. But if I wanted the audio and the visual to play back at the same time, hit record, playback memory, and there you can see it's listing the audio and the image that's going to be captured. So I can store that onto a playback memory, clear all, and pushing that up gives me some low moving cows in the background with the image coming up as well. And again, I can layer that in with lighting, so you can build up complete states. You don't just have to have audio or just have to have it in a single fader. You can build up complete looks and store everything onto the fader. One thing that we can do is something that we refer to as the pixel toy, and I'll show you where that lives. There is some live video playback options that lives in the console. If you come into your media, into visual, and scroll down to effects, within the effects, you've got some options here. And I'm just going to come down and I'm just going to pick the first one on the list, which is balls. And what happens with that is it gives gives you two colors. I can change these colors, and it gives you a bunch of settings. And the way this works is it becomes an interactive playback screen. And just by clicking on the screen, I get little bouncing balls, and they are in the colors across the two, the red and the blue. And you'll see that there's doing a blend of some of those colors in that instance as well. Obviously, when they stop, they'll fade out. And I can change the size, I can change friction, intensity, etc., etc. So I can get some bouncing balls going quickly and easy. And that becomes an interactive thing. So again, while you're busking, you can be busking and you can have bouncing balls appearing on the beats of the music. I'm going to come into the fireworks because that's quite a fun one to play with. I'm going to pick some different colors. And again, every time I click on the screen, I end up with some new fireworks. And that's something that I can store into a playback fader. So when I bring that fader up, it activates this function, and then I can interact with my touchscreen to trigger the fireworks. The one that I do really like, I'm just going to make sure that I off that so there's no clash. The one that I actually find really useful is rain. Less useful perhaps in red and blue, but if I come down and I select a white and a sort of pale sort of cyan color, it starts to give me something that actually looks quite rainy. And I've got some other options here. The blur is how solid I want the rain. So I can go from a sort of light drizzle down to a reasonably heavy sort of downpour. I can change the size of the rain. And of course, you can fade out the rain and bring up some sort of intensity. But this actually is a really quick, easy way to get some rain happening on stage. And if you layer this in with some lighting and some sound, you start to get some really realistic effects building up quite quickly that you can interact with. So it's definitely worth having a play with some of these options. These are all your live options here. Fireworks is the sort of one I think that I find the most fun to play with. What frightening does, let's just change a color, and that's because green and pink is something that no one should ever see. So I feel this suits the frightening. But you can sort of draw some sort of zigzags and things happening across the screen. So you could animate your own lightning if you wanted to. If you could sing, if you wanted to have some lightning going, you're doing this year's production of Frankenstein. As the monster comes to life, you can sort of animate that in real time, and of course you can store that into one of your playbacks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Graham, should I hand that back to you? Have we got any questions that have popped up? There's nothing in the chat or the Q&A. I think your microphone, we have made your microphones live, so do feel free to unmute yourselves at any point. You know, don't wait for a break. If you have a question, just jump on in. Over to you, Graham.
Okay. So I'm going to take a look at a real console over here now. There's just a few things on here that we want to show on an actual console. So the first thing to mention is the bit that I was faffing around looking for before I handed over to Declan, which was the rate function. So if we hold down or just tap on playback here, we have a sequence rate option there, which allows you to press the bump button on a sequence that you'd like to change the rate for, and then you get a rate virtual fader over here, which you can bring up and down. And speed up or slow down that particular effect, that particular sequence, should I say, from there. So that's just underneath the playback function there, sequence rate. The other thing to mention just on changing rate was in Playback Toy. So if I'm in Playback Toy here, you'll see that I actually changed that. You probably can't see the numbers on there, but it's now at 79% rate. If you just tap and hold on there, it brings up the keypad, and I can put that back to 100% rate. Back as it was before, or come into any of those different effects and change the rate by a percentage value if I want to. So I've got some control over that there. So let's talk about tap tempo as well whilst we're talking about rate here. So if I was to bring up this particular sequence here, you'll see that's our RGB psych sequence. That's running at a reasonable sort of BPM right now. But if we want to speed that up, we can do so. There's a button down here called tap. Now I've actually assigned that. We mentioned in the last session that these are user-defined keys. So you probably can't see very clearly, but this one particularly is assigned as tap. If I take you over to my offline, you should see there, it says tap here. I'll just show this on this screen. If you come into setup and go to settings and then console, you've got an option here, press bottom row buttons, 2 to 6 to change function. So I can just click on that button and choose the button function that I'd like for there. So that's what it is. So the default is not tap, but I came in there and changed that on this console so that we could talk about this. So that's running as tap. So the reason I'm showing on a console is that I need to push and hold to change the rate here. So I push and hold tap, and then any sequence that's playing back, you can just tap on there and speed up the rate in time with the music or slow it down. And then that's going to run at that speed. You probably can't see again here, but it's showing a 70% rate on that sequence now. So I've slowed that down somewhat there. The nice thing about this is that even if the sequence isn't playing back, if you want to prep that and you want to come in for the next verse of the music at the right beat or the next chorus at the right beat, then you can hold down tap and just bump to the beat. And then when you do bring up the sequence, it'll come in at that speed. So you can preset your sequence rates there a little bit with the tap to tempo button there. So what's a little difficult to show you right now is the sound to light function. There is a sound to light function on here, both for the Pixel toy that Declan was showing you earlier, but also to control lighting as well. So if you have that set to lighting, and that was in media, you may have noticed, there's a little sound to light option here, lights or video toy. If you have that set to lights, then varying across the spectrum of the audio from the bass to the top end, it will play back the first 6 playback memories for you. In time with the music, in time with the various different frequencies within the music there. So there's an audio in and audio out on the back of here. So you can do a little bit of sound to light there as well if you so desire. But I think with all of the control you've got over here over sequence rate and effect speeds and things, it's probably quite good to be able to do that manually as well, I think. But the option is there if you need it. let's take a little look at a couple of other features then. One thing to mention is the remote. So a lot of people ask us if there is a remote app for this console. There isn't an app, but there is a web browser feature. So that will allow you to connect to the console via your smartphone or even via a computer. So I've actually got that set up here from my computer. So it's a fairly simple thing to do. This is only available on the AV consoles because they have a network port. So this is Ethernet-based remote control. So you would want a wireless access point plugged into your console. And at that point, you can connect your phone via any web browser on your device. So the key thing to do when you set that up is to go into Setup and go to Settings, and then you have a network setting in there. Set your IP address in the right range, or if you have a DHCP service, so an address service running on your wireless access point, which you're likely to have if it's a domestic grade one. By default, out of the box, it will probably get an IP address from there. So there's very little setup to do. And then within here, you see a little QR code which you can scan, and that will open up the web browser on your device via the QR code and log you into this IP address of the console, which is listed here. You can do it that way, or you can do it manually. If I bring up my web browser of choice, which happens to be Chrome at the moment, you'll see here I've already logged in to the console. So all I did was type in the IP address of the console, which for me here is 10.101.33.33. And that brings me in by default onto the color page here. So that's logged me in via web browser into the console. So now everything I'm seeing on my screen here is what you would see on your smartphone or on your web browser on your computer if you want to be a remote from there. And I can click on these various tabs up here. So I've got channels, and that allows me to interact with the channel map. I come in there, grab those guys and bring them on. I just toggle you back to that display. You'll see they've come in there. So everything that you're doing on here is happening live on the console. So you've got control there. We can do some color control with these guys as well. And come into the color picker. Let's have a red for those guys. Let's show you what's happened there. And I've chosen my colors on there as well. Other options you have here, you've got your quick select tools, which we mentioned in the last session. So some grouping tools in there. And you've got a pan and tilt crosshair in there as well, so you can do some positioning whilst you're on stage with your remote. Full access to your playbacks as well. So this could be somebody else could be controlling here. Maybe if you want somebody at the sound position or something who's doing a one-man operation and they don't have space for the console, they could just have their laptop up on a shelf and they can control from here as well. And you've got full control of everything from there. You also have your playback toy in here, which we just looked at as well. So you've got controls there. Again, this could be a web browser on a computer with a touchscreen, which gives you a lot more flexibility then to start controlling the console from a larger touchscreen. Then you have your cue list, and you have the option to view the patch as well from here. There's no editing of patch from this remote, but you can come in here and take a look at that and see what's going on in your patch on stage. So that's a very quick, simple solution to a remote. There's no app required. There's no purchase required. As I say, it's just a web browser into the console directly. A couple of other things to mention about remote control. OSC is enabled on the ColorSource AV consoles. Again, it has a network port, so it allows you to do that. The non-AV versions don't have that network port, so you don't have the OSC option there. But OSC is open sound control, if that's something that you haven't come across before. And it's a protocol which is used in many different manufacturers' equipment now, both from audio, video, and lighting. And people will use it just to trigger between devices. So we find people using it a lot with QLab and triggering cues backwards and forwards between console and QLab. But just as an example to show how that works here, there's a whole bunch of different commands you can use, but I'm actually running EOS offline there. So this is the EOS console offline software, just as something to trigger my ColorSource console with. So if I, on here, go into my cue list and pop myself into cue 0, which I'm in at the moment, I'm just going to back up on EOS. Sorry, I know you can't see all of my screens. I will switch you over in a second. So within EOS, if I run a cue, as you'll see right now, I'm currently sat here in Q1. If I fire off a cue on EOS, the way I've got this set up right now is just to run a go command via OSC to the console. So if I run a cue, it's progressed. It should have progressed down here. There you go. It's progressed into the next queue on ColorSource. So all I'm doing is sending a little OSC string from EOS to ColorSource to trigger a queue within there. This is queue list triggering queue list. There's a whole list of options within the manual for ColorSource, which allows you to trigger individual playback memories, sequences. You can pretty much do any button push within the ColorSource console via OSC. So there's just a load of string messages which can be sent. As I say, they can come from anywhere. So if you do have a bigger sound show happening, which you're doing maybe with QLab or some other manufacturer's software, you can trigger your basic lighting cues from there directly, or vice versa. We can send out commands from ColorSource to another device, or have it coming into ColorSource and triggering ColorSource. So again, for one-man operation or one-woman operation, that is probably a good option for you as well there. So I think that's pretty much covered most of those things.
I've just put the link to the manual into the chat window, so if anybody needs access, quick, easy access to the manual, it's in there, and all the OSC commands and stuff are listed in there.
Yeah, the user manual for ColorSource is very thorough and very easy to read, so if there is anything that you need to brush up on, it's all very nicely explained in there. So I think we've pretty much taken you through most of the features of the console. As I mentioned, I think it is a very powerful console for its size and its price point. There's a lot you can do with this, and it's great for those venues where you're doing one thing one night, a theatre show one night, and then a band the next night and a comedian the next night. So I think it's a really useful tool for that. I haven't seen any questions come in on the Q&A. So let's see if anybody throws anything in there. I guess not. Have you got anything else, Declan?
No, nothing really at the moment. Just obviously, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. This session will be added to the study hall channel like our other sessions. If you did miss the first part and you want to catch up, that is also available on the study hall sessions. You can catch up on the YouTube channel. If you Google ET or you search for ETC study hall, you'll come across the whole list of everything we've done, and part one of the ColorSource demo is there as well. Great. Well, yeah, I think that covers ColorSource for us, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you in another session soon.
Thanks very much.